I want to talk to a couple of people who, in their different ways, are supporting the Extinction Rebellion protests which are taking place this week. We talked about it for an hour yesterday. Jonathan Fishwick joins me, and Calum Fishwick, father and son. Jonathan, dad; Calum, son. Good afternoon to you both.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jonathan, first of all, you're not a member, so to speak, of Extinction Rebellion, but you're very supportive of what they do, and you've been down there supporting them this time around, last time around as well.
Yeah, massively since the start, actually, yeah.
Why?
Because they offer us probably the only hope that we have of actually taking and treating this crisis seriously. No one else really is looking at the deep implications of what the climate ecological crisis is bringing. So they're the first people that really have stepped forward.
No, come on. The UN, the politicians, you might not be satisfied with the degree to which they're doing it, but the scientists, they're looking at it.
They're looking at it, but they're not actually taking what they're reading and understanding of the situation into actual action. It's so woefully inadequate what's actually taking place.
Paris Agreement?
Paris Agreement takes us to way above what would be safe, way above. It would lead us to
carbon emissions.
Of carbon emissions, yeah. The planet is overheating so rapidly that we have to act as if it's an emergency, and we clearly are not.
How long have you been active as an environmental campaigner?
It feels like since forever, certainly since my early 20s. I've always, been members of groups like Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, but it's never been enough. I mean, I've always known that we were heading in the wrong direction, not taking into account that we have to stay within nature's limits. So even without the sort of extreme warming of the planet that we're experiencing now, I knew that we were beyond, staying within our environmental limits. We were running up a huge credit bill with nature. And there are some things that you know more with your heart than with your head. So I've always felt that we were in crisis.
But it's an important combination of both that you need to communicate to people if you're going to get their support, isn't it? It has to be a bit of both.
A bit of both what?
Heart and head.
Heart and head, exactly, yes. I mean, and certainly my head, I've done plenty of looking at the climate science in great detail, and so has Calum. And we've both come to the conclusion that, desperate emergency measures are required if we have any hope of getting out of this.
Calum, let me bring you in here. Thanks for joining us. You've taken quite a step, haven't you? You've given up an engineering apprenticeship to campaign full-time on environmental issues.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I realised that I didn't have any time to waste. So I've sort of put everything on hold to go, full-time into this. And then, if it is something that is fixed, and again, there's not really any solutions that I'm aware of that's going to prevent sort of the collapse of society in the near term. There's things we can try, but we're not even doing the things that we should be trying. So,
but why are you so certain that the, quotes, collapse of society is imminent?
Probably due to the loss of Arctic ice. The impact that's going to have on the jet stream and the global agricultural system is going to be quite fragile to that. And it really does come down to food at the end of the day.
And when people say, as they do, we've adapted before, we'll adapt again, what do you say to that?
Yeah, well, we need to start adapting now, and that's really why we're doing what we're doing, because we need to start bringing about this adaptation before it is too late.
How do you live? How have you been able to afford to give up probably, a really important engineering apprenticeship and focus entirely on the environment? Because it won't surprise you to know that plenty of people were calling in and texting in yesterday to say these guys should go and get a job.
Well, I've started living in a community, so the last couple of months I've been volunteering at Butterfield, so just living in community, and it's a much simpler way of living, much less impactful on the environment. And it's really connecting with other people.
You mean a community of fellow environmentalists who focus all of their time on that? How is that funded?
So it's just we just live together, and it's just on a sort of donation basis. People coming together and sharing and putting on events for other people to come and learn about not just environmental stuff, but also Buddhism and other things of that nature. But there are other ways around it, and I think we're all going to see in the future that money isn't going to save us in this case.
Do you support what he's doing, Jonathan?
Absolutely, totally. I'm delighted. I'm so proud of him. And if I could just come in on that point about getting a job. Getting a job is actually just continuing with business as usual with what we're already doing. And business as usual is killing the planet. So what has to be understood is that we need radical systemic structural change. And
to what it means to be in a society.
Yes, the whole of society really has to change. We need an agricultural revolution. We need to look at the ways...
What would that look like?
That would look like moving towards away from chemical industrial agriculture on a huge scale. It would look more like adopting the principles of permaculture, because it needs to be small scale, low scale. As Calum says, we need to start living low impact lives.
But don't we need engineers? I mean, I'm looking at the skills, the valuable skills he would get in that apprenticeship.
He's actually an electrical
well, you know, we're going to need all kinds of smart minds on this, aren't we, to make those changes.
Exactly, but there are plenty of those people out there already, and that kind of assumes that we have more time than we actually have. I mean, this thing is so much closer than perhaps even you realise. This is something that I come across so often, that there is this kind of almost disbelief, you know, that we're all not quite there in terms of actually taking on board, really taking to heart the implications of what's coming. We have to act and put things on an emergency footing.
But when you, and I know you don't mean to poo-poo it, but when you quotes poo-poo the idea of having a job, you know, you're an adult man. Look around you. There are families under pressure. We know that that's all part of the narrative. Actually, that you know there is absolutely a debate to be had about how we live, how we earn money, how we share money, how we distribute wealth, and all the rest of it. But people are expected to work, aren't they? And live and stand on their own 2 feet. And Calum, you know, you talk about the community, and I get that. But for example, having decided to give up your apprenticeship, are you on benefits, for example?
No, I'm not currently claiming benefits.
Well, the reason I ask that question is that, you know, I'm trying to get under the skin of some of the questions that people put to me about this, because, you know, the benefit system is there when people are in need, not when they place themselves unnecessarily in need.
Yeah, no, that's very true. But yeah, the thing is that, you know, if I was to just carry on with my apprenticeship, then I think I would really look back on this time and say, hey, you know, I could have done more. We all regret things in life, and I think it would be a pretty big regret to put my career, you know, after learning what I've learned, ahead of, you know, the survival of myself and everything around me.
And how old are you, Calum, if I can ask you?
25.
25. You wanted to say something, Jonathan?
Yeah, just that it's not that we don't need to work. It's just that it needs to be a different type of work, one that is actually sustainable. Otherwise, continuing with what we're doing, which seems to be just getting by, if that leads to long-term disaster, then it's ridiculous to continue with it.
So you're talking about what? Smaller communities, going back, quotes back to a more arable existence? Is that what you're talking about? The end of cities? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not sitting here saying that I've got the solutions. I'm saying that we need to come together as a global community and look at what sort of solutions we can come up with. What's obvious is that we need to put the brakes on this juggernaut that's taking us towards the precipice, and that maybe even because we don't necessarily have a clear picture of what the future would be like, it doesn't mean to say that we don't need to stop what's happening now. If the house is on fire, we need to put it out.
Callum, how long do you plan to live in this way? Or are you not making it? You're only 25, you don't have to decide forever, but is it, it doesn't sound like it was what you expected to do, but clearly the whole story has had an impact on you if you have done this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was, you know, again, thinking of myself like I'm going to live, you know, 60 plus years and have a family and have children and you know, I was doing pretty well at life. But then all of a sudden becoming aware of the crisis that we're in and really looking into it and taking it to heart, you know, everything, it just changes everything. So really, yeah, I'm just looking now to connect and just do everything that's in my control that I can to really, you know, combat what we're facing. So I'm not sure where the future takes me, but it's definitely, you know, my passion is to share what I've learned and try to help others. And yeah, I think it's just natural to, you know, and it feels great to do the right thing, but it's natural, you know, want to survive and you know, for the survival of...
Well, you've made your dad proud already, so that's not bad going at 25, is it? A final thought from you, Jonathan. You began by talking about people whose heads and hearts just aren't getting it.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? What should if they do one thing today? walk in your direction?
I would invite them to be brave enough to really look at the climate science. There's a very good talk that Extinction Rebellion put out called Heading for Extinction and What to Do About It. And if you get a sense of really how grave the situation is, instead of putting it off and being in some way in denial of it, then you will radically look at your life and perhaps reframe what's important to you. Because at the moment, a lot of distraction. I mean, the discussion here continuing about Brexit and a no deal, is actually going to be quite irrelevant on a dying planet. You cannot have a planet where the soil, the air and the water are all so being degraded that it's actually threatening our life support system, and not come to the conclusion that we're living on a dying planet.
Thank you to both of you, to Jonathan Fishwick, Dad, Calum Fishwick, son, both environmental campaigners.
Thanks
very much indeed. Thanks for taking that. You heading back to the Strand now, or are they at the Strand again today? Extinction Rebellion?
No, it's near the Old Vic Waterloo Bridge. So I think it's called the Millennium Garden.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Didn't mention that you were both arrested earlier this year, weren't you? In the April
we were
protests,
twice.
Spent a night in cells. Dear me, what a family they are.